Hello everyone! Every 2 weeks we receive a balance update for League of Legends. This season is way past its middle point now. As they've promised, Riot Games are giving everything the time to settle down, so the patch 8.13 will not see too many changes. Even though the bot lane meta really needs to be rebalanced and the mid lane supports plus jungle carries need to be nerfed. They don't want to make big changes yet, but they did nerf a few champions who were fitting in the current metas a bit too well. Also, patch 8.13 has brought us a rework for Aatrox, which we will review soon enough. So without further ado, let's get to reviewing the changes brought by patch 8.13. Irelia's popularity in solo queue and among professional players has forced Riot to nerf her a little bit. Her early damage is too high, and so is her mobility. And once she reaches level 6, the laning phase for mid lane squishes playing against her was pretty much over. Her passive has received a massive early game nerf, which will prevent Irelia from killing full health champions at level 2. Defiant Dance now deals less damage even when fully charged, and the mark left by Flawless Duet and Vanguard's Edge now persists for a second less than before, leaving Irelia with less room for thinking. Overall, the changes mostly affect her early game, which will create some difficult matchups for her. However, once she buys a couple of items, she will get back to her full strength. Summing up, Irelia remains a very strong champion, but he won't be able to pick her as blindly every match, as some matchups will now be less than pleasant for her. Kindred gets buffed for the 3rd patch in a row. We did tell you to take a look at this champion when the last patch came out, but right now they simply became one of the best junglers in the current meta. An enhancement of their W will improve their early jungle clearing and skirmishes. The monsters might not receive the attack speed debuff anymore, but Kindred are ranged and can just guide them around while clearing, making that flaw less relevant. The attack damage growth decrease for Lucian will not be as noticeable as the rest of the issues the marksmen have to face in the current meta. But it will still be much more difficult to just clear the lane with an ultimate and get back to base. However, this only really affects the first level of his ultimate. By his level 11, Lucian should have enough damage from his items to clear the wave with a single use of his ultimate, so these are not dramatic changes to his overall balance. Riot Games are trying to make Pyke play by the rules. As we noticed last week, Korean players figured out that Pyke needs damage resistance from items like Frozen Heart or Ziggs Convergence, rather than armor penetration or damage. However, Riot Games still want him to be a supportive assassin, which is why Pyke is receiving a small change. His health pool is now lower, but his basic damage resistances are increased. That will make the purchase of damage resistance items less cost effective, EHP wise. Furthermore, his basic damage scales are lowered, but the bonus damage scales are increased. This is a nerf to his early game, but a huge buff for his late game. These changes will only weaken Pyke in general, making him even less popular than before. As we've already noticed, there was no problem with the damage items on Pyke. They suit him very well. The problem is most of them are very expensive, and the supportive Pyke just doesn't have enough gold to buy them in time to keep up with the rest of the map. Alright, let's get to less significant changes now. A buff to W ability on Gragas will give him more ganking opportunities during the early game. Also, a lowered cooldown on that same ability will make his jungle clearing speed much faster. On par with Gragas, Jarvan is also getting a slight buff. This increases the competition among the junglers. Since the Demacian standard is usually leveled up last, this will make Jarvan a bit stronger during the early stages of the game. Previous changes to crit-based marksmen in patch 8.12 have forced Riot Games to buff Jinx by a little bit. This will not really help to bring her back into the meta, especially when compared with other bot lane champions. Critical chance items are still too expensive, much more expensive than the magic damage or on-hit effect items are. Just like with Jinx, buffing Tristana and Twitch will most likely not bring them back into the meta, since the critical hit items have not received any changes. Kalista also receives a small buff, which should help her to get back into the meta. She was one of the few marksmen to fit into the meta after the last patch, as we've said in our marksman overview video. She works well against the fighters and can fit in the same tier as Lucian and Miss Fortune. An increase to ability power scales on his W, E and his ultimate abilities will bring Kassadin back into the meta, especially when he is played with a mid to late game tier of the Goddess item build. It is easier to stack the tier up since the Nether Blade now has a small mana cost. In the current meta, where the passive mid lanes with utility-based mid laners have become a reality, this might benefit Kassadin a lot, providing him with free farming and increased damage in the late game. A decreased cooldown on Orianna's W ability should make her laning phase and teamfights a little bit more aggressive. More casting will require more mana however, so a quick Luden Zeko build will be very risky, and a safer tier of the goddess might be needed beforehand. Alright, so let's get to the nerfs now. A nerf to Camille's hookshot will seriously impact her early game. This was the ability players prioritized both on the lane and in the jungle. Camille was one of the most popular champions among the professional players last patch, but we can't say the same about the solo queue. This nerf is a good example of how Riot Games can make changes to a champion balance without really understanding how it will impact the solo queue at all. Dr. Mundo has started to gain some popularity on the top lane and in the jungle in both solo queue and competitive scene. Masochism really was an exceptionally strong ability in the Mundo's kit. Nerfing it will decrease his pushing power and will give more breathing room to squishier champions, which couldn't endure his onslaught for more than a few seconds before. Instead of a global nerf to mid and jungle farming combos, where all the jungle and mid lane farming was going to a single champion, Riot Games have made a series of small nerfs to specific champions. For example, Master Yi has received a nerf to his Alpha Strike. It will be more difficult for him to slaughter an entire wave of minions with a single use of his Q. So he won't be able to clear the wave for a few seconds at his level 4 and get straight back to jungle anymore. Just as with Master Yi, Nunu is receiving a nerf because of how often he is being used in a combination with jungle Karthus or Kai'Sa, giving them all the farm in the jungle and the mid lane. Blood Boil was nerfed significantly, and a part of the power that ability provided was moved to ability power scales. But Nunu is not the kind of champion to build ability power items, as he becomes too fragile when he does. This will lead to a decrease in his popularity, especially in the higher ratings. The third victim to these vicious nerfs to double support setups is Taric. Taric was usually picked on par with Master Yi. An increase to the cooldown of his ultimate to 3 full minutes on level 1 will make the Taric and Master Yi combination a lot weaker in the early game, and will decrease their snowballing potential. Okay, so let's get to the item changes now. Luckily not, we only have one this time, and it was Guinsoo's Rageblade. You can imagine how outraged the marksman with a huge love to on-hit effects will be. First critical chance items, now the Guinsoo's, which was a favorite item of Kalista, Kai'Sa, Kog'Maw and other on-hit marksmen. This will surely affect those marksmen during the mid to late game, and some champions like Kayle will have to find another item to build. Rune changes. The Domination rune path is getting a buff to the passive effects when combined with other paths. This change won't cause any dramatic balance changes, but it's a pleasant bonus to champions who utilize the Electrocute and Predator keystones. Another buff to the Hail of Blades keystone. The previous buff actually made it a bit more popular among the junglers, especially on Kindred. But even this one will not make any laning champion pick it over the keystones. As we've noted in our previous clips, the main problem of this rune is not in the numbers, but in how difficult it is to use it when laning. Since it is difficult to leave the combat when you are constantly trying to last hit the minions, you can't really recharge this rune effectively. Riot Games are trying to bring the once nerfed Unsealed Spellbook keystone back into the game. However, 6 unique spells is still too much. For example, when you are using a heal plus flash and use a teleport to your tower at minute 7, you will have to use 3 more unique spells to be able to use teleport again. Sure, you can pick the Barrier, Ghost and Ignite, but you will still waste too much time to swap them before being able to use the teleport. However, this rune will be great for Zoe or Ryze, who are very comfortable with using different summoner spells. Alright, now guys, the icing on the cake. Let's talk about the most significant changes of this patch. As we've noted before, the snowballing became a prevailing thing to happen in the current matches, and the chance for the comeback has fallen significantly. Riot Games have finally addressed this issue. Early deaths will not throw you as far back as before. This will make a riskier, aggressive playstyles more popular. A bounty for double kills and an increase to those bounties will give a significant increase to comeback chances, even when the lead is not that big. So now, whenever you are trying to make use of your advantage, you have to be very careful as to not gift your opponents with a huge gold bonus. The third change in this category is a change to global gold granted for the Turi destruction. Outer turrets will now give less gold to every team member, which won't change much balance-wise, as the outer turrets are not destroyed for the gold, and are usually destroyed for the positioning and vision advantage. Alright guys, so this will be it for this small patch review. Overall, there weren't any major balance changes this time, and only the changes to Aurelia and a full rework of Aatrox really deserve attention. We'll soon release a video review about the new Aatrox, so stay tuned. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and good luck on your solo queue.